Welcome to Season 3 of The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha, during which Sid will get religion. This is Episode 1. Now, the easiest way to catch up or refer back to the first two seasons of The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha and put inscrutable smiles on Sid and the Buddha's faces is to become a paid subscriber on Substack, because when you sign up, we'll send you paperback editions of both Season 1 and Season 2. Plus, we're going to do an ebook of each chapter, which will only be available to paid subscribers. Now, Episode 1 of Season 3. Chaos was Dai's resting state. Whether returning from shopping, grandparenting, balancing Sid's teeter-tottering balance sheets, or insisting that the members of some nonprofit board stop talking and fucking do something, Dai knew that whatever she had dealt with in the outside world might pale beside whatever strangeness had possessed Sid while she'd been away. An expectation that had become even more likely since Sid's cancer diagnosis had liberated him from any remaining sense of responsibility to behave the way most people considered responsible. "Oh, it's just my anaplastic ependymoma talking," he'd explain. The fact that all their grandchildren considered their house a home away from home, if not their real home, only added to the quantum craziness she'd come to expect when she walked in the door. Fortunately, her nervous system vibrated so fast that everything around her seemed like it was standing still, no matter how chaotic it appeared. Living proof that Einstein's theory of relativity existed even on the human scale. Dai prided herself on being able to know which of her grandchildren, and how many of their friends, were roaming the house based on the mishmash of familiar and unfamiliar shoes, usually with coats thrown on top of them, just inside the door, or during summer, the damp swimsuits and towels draped over chairs. It didn't matter. She was used to all that. But this time, Sid had upped the ante. The smell of sawdust gave her pause. The sound of a power drill gave her a brief palpitation. Still, she smiled bravely, took off her coat, hung it up, and walked slowly toward those strange smells and sounds. At the entry to the living room, she stood completely still and was at a loss for words. The room was 20 feet long and 14 feet wide, with an additional 6-foot by 10-foot alcove that featured a floor-to-ceiling Palladian window at the far end. There were 2 orange tilting and swiveling Art Deco chairs in the alcove, each with its own side table, where Sid and Dai would sit at the end of the day, tilting, swiveling, making phone calls, and reading the paper. The view out the window included a lot of lake, a little lawn, and a bit of driveway, affording, as Sid put it, a panoramic view of his domain. One of those orange chairs was no longer in the alcove. It was to the left of the door, occupied by Sid, who was avidly reading a book, turning down page corners and making notations, in ink. Undoubtedly a library book, hand-delivered by his buddy Johnny D, the director, who'd go back to his office and immediately order another copy, assuming Sid would never return it, or if he did, it would be in no condition to put back in circulation. Dai stood completely still and was at a loss for words. The other orange chair was no longer in the alcove either. It was to the right of the door and occupied by Zoey, who was working on a laptop with multiple open windows, undoubtedly at least one of which was AI. Next to each of their chairs was its side table, chocolate milk on both. Dai stood completely still and was at a loss for words. "Hey, Grandpa," Zoey commented, as if he were her college research partner. "Did you know that parrots don't actually have vocal cords? It's more like a kazoo in their throats." "Zoey!" Sid said in response without using his vocal cords. "Hi, Grandma," she continued, without looking up or showing any sign of how she knew Dai had appeared. Kesey told Grandpa Sid that the parrot's name is Pāli, not the Polly has a cracker Polly that Nabisco made famous, way back, like before even you and Grandpa Sid were born. It's because of a famous Buddhist book called the Pāli Canon, spelled P-A-L-I, Sid added, with one of those flat accent marks over the A, Zoey added helpfully. "Pāli!" Sid added, less helpfully, in his new parrot voice, going up on the last syllable. Dai stood completely still and was at a loss for words. At the far end, in front of that Palladian window, Willy was holding what looked like a 6-foot-wide wooden frame, while Junior was using a power drill to run screws through braces on the floor, right on top of the expensive rug Di had bought the year before. Between them, a teenage girl with a tape measure balanced on a stepladder, steadying the top rail with one hand while she checked the gap from the window. 4 inches, she said. Good. Okay, first wire panel, Willy, Junior said. His cousin went over to get one of the sheets of stiff metal mesh that were leaning against the sidewall. I'll help, Willy, the girl said, getting off the stepladder. That's Cindy, Zoey said, answering one of her grandmother's dozens of unasked questions. Junior's new girlfriend. Hello, Mrs. Sid, Cindy said politely. We're not really boyfriend and girlfriend, she continued, which sure came as a surprise to Junior, considering what they'd been doing in the back seat of his parents' car Friday night. To his relief, Cindy looked up and winked at him. No winking, Sid said in his Pāli voice. Di stood completely still and was at a loss for words. Willy tried to reassure Di. We're building an aviary for Pāli, he said cautiously, and seriously, like it was a school project. He didn't know why it seemed he was the only one afraid that his grandma would be upset that they were making such a mess. It's okay. It'll only be here for a little while, he added, which only made things worse, since the implication was that the parrot would be long gone, if not forgotten, when Sid died. Which he was implying would only be a little while. I mean, Kizzy will miss him and... Don't worry, Willy, Sid rescued him. I think Pāli is coming with me. Hey, Zoey interrupted. According to the Guinness Book of Records, the oldest parrot was named Cookie and died when he was 82. But other people say Winston Churchill had a parrot that ended up living more than 100 years. I'm prepared, she continued, having already moved on to Winston Churchill quotes, only to be interrupted by Sid, who finished the quote. To meet my maker. Whether my maker is prepared for meeting me is another matter. Oh, he doesn't care, the Buddha thought. It's all one to him. He's made billions of you humans. Seen him come, seen him go. Do you need your chair, Grandma? Zoey asked. Di didn't answer. She stood completely still and was at a loss for words. Geez, this Pāli guy had the same hang-ups as the Buddhas, my other scribes, Sid said with a little less than compassionate exasperation. 5 hindrances? To what? He said to anyone who would listen, which was a grand total of no one. I'm listening, the Buddha thought. It's a good question, although a little compassion would help open their hearts and minds if that's your goal. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000,000 times, Sid continued, sounding a little peevish. Hey, Zoey, where does that expression come from? Virginia Woolf, she answered without missing a beat. But she said thousands. Oh, and here, Mark Twain used it too, but he said hundreds. Those are just 2 examples, Grandpa said. Well, I think the Buddha said it. Actually, it was Jesus, the Buddha thought. Something about camels passing through the eyes of needles. I never really got it. Probably Jesus, Sid mumbled to himself, complaining about rich people again. Damn, now I've forgotten what it was I said 1,000,000 times. Di stood completely still and was at a loss for words. Hindrances, Grandpa said. Thanks, so. But how could sensual desire be a hindrance? He asked, looking up from the book. To what? Boredom? He's getting pretty good at this, the Buddha thought. I guess there's nothing wrong with a little peevishness. Enlightenment, Sid continued, feeling like he was on a roll. How can something be a hindrance to something you already are? Everyone's already enlightened. Now we're getting somewhere, the Buddha thought. Although this is only the 2nd time you said it, not 100. Words finally began to form on the tip of Di's tongue. She weighed each one carefully, trying to balance Sid's terminal diagnosis with the fact that she wanted to kill him. Those orange chairs were her favorite ones to sit on, next to her favorite side tables to put her magazines, books, notes, etc., in front of her favorite window to look out of. Now they'd been unceremoniously moved to the other side of the room, create what was either the largest indoor birdcage she could imagine, or the prison she thought Sid should be put into, probably both. She managed to nod, turn around, and return to the kitchen, where she pondered her choices. Coffee, a glass of wine, shot of whiskey, maybe Valium. She came back with the wine and stood at the door. Sid turned his head and looked at her to get a quick damage assessment. Finally, Di spoke. Excuse me. Everything stopped. You could hear a pin drop. I wonder how many angels are dancing on the head of that pin, the Buddha wondered. Zoey had already started looking up the derivation of angels dancing on the head of a pin. Wow, it goes way back to the 1600s, she thought to herself. The Buddha smiled. He enjoyed it when someone besides Sid caught one of his thoughts as it floated by. And when is Pāli, the parrot, coming? Di asked. Oh, Keezy's bringing him tomorrow, Sid said. Di looked at Sid, who smiled up at her hopefully. She raised her eyebrows and smiled back, proving once again she could maintain her equanimity in the midst of whatever chaos he had created. I guess I better see if we have any crackers, Di said. Again, paperback versions of Season 1 or 2 are free for annual paid subscribers. If you want to catch up or look back, and they're great for people my age who still vastly prefer reading words on paper. Thanks for supporting Sid, the Buddha, and me as we explore new ways to celebrate and sometimes deconstruct spiritual traditions.